The only sound is the crunch of snow underfoot, your own breath turning to ice in the frigid air. The ancient pines creak and groan around you, their branches heavy with winter's weight. This is the great northern wilderness, a vast, unforgiving expanse of forest and frozen lakes. It's a place where civilization feels a world away, and something much, much older holds dominion. They say this is the land of the whisper in the pines, a name spoken in hushed tones around crackling fires, a modern name for an ancient terror. The first stories come from the Algonquian-speaking peoples, tales passed down through countless generations. They speak of a spirit of the lonely places, a malevolent entity born from the harshest winters. It begins with starvation, the desperate gnawing hunger that drives a person to the unthinkable. When a man, woman, or child, lost and freezing, succumbs to that final taboo and consumes the flesh of another human, a terrible transformation occurs. Their heart freezes solid, their humanity drains away, and they become something else entirely. They become Wendigo. The descriptions are chillingly consistent across different tribal accounts. The creature is emaciated, its skin stretched taut over a skeletal frame, its complexion the ashen gray of death. Its eyes are pushed deep into their sockets, glowing with a malevolent, unholy light. Despite its starved appearance, it is said to possess supernatural strength and speed, able to move through the densest forest without a sound. It is always hungry, eternally cursed, with an insatiable appetite for human flesh. The more it eats, the larger it grows, and the more its hunger intensifies. A horrifying, endless cycle of consumption. One of the most well-known accounts involves a Cree trapper named Swift Runner. In the winter of 1879, he and his family were isolated in the wilderness of what is now Alberta, Canada. When he emerged from the forest alone in the spring, he claimed his family had starved to death, but his story didn't add up. He looked surprisingly well fed. The authorities became suspicious and pressed him. He finally confessed to a horrific truth. He had killed and eaten his wife, his 6 children, his mother, and his brother. He claimed he was possessed by the spirit of the Wendigo. He was tried, found guilty, and executed. But his story serves as a terrifying reminder that the legend is not just a myth. It is rooted in the very real horrors of winter survival. But the stories didn't end in the 19th century, they evolved. As loggers and prospectors pushed deeper into the boreal forests, they brought back their own terrifying encounters. They didn't call it Wendigo. They called it the whisper in the pines. Men would vanish from logging camps without a trace. A lone hunter would be found weeks later, his body discovered in a state that defied explanation. They would tell tales of a strange whistling sound carried on the wind just before a fellow worker disappeared, a sound that seemed to mimic human speech, but was twisted and wrong. They spoke of a tall, gaunt figure glimpsed between the trees at twilight, moving with an unnatural, loping gait. In the 1950s, a group of geological surveyors mapping a remote area of northern Ontario reported weeks of unsettling activity. At night, they would hear a high-pitched chattering sound just beyond the firelight. Tools would go missing, only to be found days later, bent and broken, miles from their camp. One night, a surveyor on watch swore he saw a tall gray figure standing at the edge of the clearing, its long arms dangling almost to its knees. It simply stood there, watching, before melting back into the impenetrable darkness. The team abandoned their survey a week early, refusing to return to the area. Their official report cited unsettling wildlife encounters, but their personal journals told a much more frightening story. The creature seems to possess a terrifying intelligence, a predatory cunning that goes beyond that of any known animal. It is said to be a perfect mimic. It can replicate the cry of a baby to lure a rescuer from the safety of their cabin. It can whisper your name on the wind, a voice that sounds familiar, drawing you deeper into the woods. One tale from a small town in northern Minnesota tells of a search party looking for a missing child. As they swept through the woods, several members heard the little girl's voice calling for help, always just a little further ahead. They followed the voice for hours, becoming disoriented and separated. They never found the girl, and 2 members of the search party were never seen again. Those who returned spoke of the voice changing as night fell, becoming distorted and guttural, ending in a sound that was not human at all. This psychological torment is a key element of the legend. The whisper in the pines doesn't just hunt the body, it hunts the mind. It preys on fear, on isolation, on the paranoia that creeps in when you're alone in the vast, silent wilderness. It is the feeling of being watched when you know you are alone. It is the branch that snaps just behind you. It is the shadow that moves in your peripheral vision. It is the embodiment of the forest's indifference to human life. Modern encounters continue to be reported. Hikers on the Appalachian Trail, campers in the remote regions of the Great Lakes, even drivers on lonely stretches of highway that cut through dense forests. They all report similar phenomena. A fleeting glimpse of a tall, unnaturally thin figure sprinting across the road in their headlights. Strange, humanoid tracks found in the snow or mud, far too large for any man. The feeling of a sudden, inexplicable dread washing over them. A primal instinct screaming at them to flee. The internet is filled with these first-hand accounts, shared on forums and social media. A man ice fishing on a remote lake describes hearing his name whispered from the far shore, even though he was miles from the nearest person. A woman camping with her family recalls being woken by a scratching sound on the outside of their tent, followed by a low, guttural breathing. When her husband shone a flashlight outside, they saw nothing, but the distinct scent of decay and rot hung heavy in the air. These are not people seeking fame. They are ordinary individuals, sharing experiences that have left them deeply shaken, convinced they have come face to face with something ancient and malevolent. The most disturbing aspect of the creature is its connection to what is known as Wendigo psychosis. It's described as an intense craving for human flesh and a fear of becoming a cannibal. In the past, this was a recognized affliction among northern Algonquian communities. An individual suffering from it would be seen as possessed by the spirit of the Wendigo, a threat to the entire community. The terror was not just of being eaten by the monster, but of becoming it. It suggests the creature's influence is not merely physical, but spiritual, a contagion of the soul that spreads through fear and desperation. So as the temperature drops and the northern winds begin to howl, remember the stories. When you're deep in the woods and the sun begins to set, and the silence is so profound it feels heavy, listen. Listen past the creaking of the trees and the whistle of the wind, because sometimes if you listen closely enough, you might hear something else. A whisper, a voice that sounds almost human, carried on the breeze. And if you hear it call your name, do not answer. Do not look for its source. Just turn and walk away, quickly. It is a hunger that has waited for centuries, a hunger that is patient, a hunger that is never ever satisfied. It is always out there, in the cold and the dark, watching and waiting. The snow muffles all sound, and the trees stand as silent witnesses. No one will hear you. Not out here. Not in the land of the whisper in the pines. The cold seeps into your bones, a different kind of cold than the air. It's a cold that comes from within, a deep primal fear. You feel it now, don't you? The feeling of being watched. You turn, scanning the tree line, seeing nothing but snow and shadow. But the feeling persists. A twig snaps to your left. You freeze. Your heart hammers against your ribs. It's probably just an animal, a deer or a fox, but then you hear it, faintly at first, barely audible over the wind. A thin, high-pitched sound. A whisper. It seems to come from all directions at once. It sounds like your name. Before the name Wendigo became a synonym for a skeletal, ravenous monster, it was a warning, a chilling prophecy of what happens when the laws of nature and humanity are broken. The story often begins in the dead of winter, a time the Algonquian-speaking peoples called the starvation moon. Imagine a small, isolated hunting party, or perhaps a family, trapped by unrelenting blizzards. The snow piles higher than a man's head. Game becomes impossible to find, and the precious stores of dried meat and berries dwindle to nothing. Days turn into weeks. The fire. their only source of warmth, sputters, hungry for fuel that is buried under an impenetrable blanket of white. It is in this crucible of cold and hunger that the first terrible choice is presented. The gnawing emptiness in the stomach becomes a physical torment, a madness that clouds the mind. The bonds of family, of community, of everything that makes us human begin to fray. The eyes of the starving turn from the empty landscape to each other. In this moment of ultimate despair, the taboo of all taboos is considered, consuming the flesh of another human being to survive. According to the lore, the first person to succumb to this act seals their fate. The moment the forbidden flesh passes their lips, a transformation begins. It is not instantaneous, but a slow, agonizing corruption of both spirit and body. The act itself is a spiritual poison. It invites a malevolent, ancient spirit of winter and famine into the person's soul. This spirit, some say, is the very essence of insatiable hunger. The individual is overwhelmed with a grotesque, all-consuming greed, not just for food, but for everything. This isn't the normal hunger of a starving person. It is a supernatural craving that can never be satisfied. The more they eat, the hungrier they become. Their physical form begins to change, mirroring the decay of their spirit. They grow taller, their bodies stretching and emaciating until they are gaunt figures of skin and bone, yet possessing a terrifying, unnatural strength. Their skin turns ashen, pulled taut over their jutting bones, sometimes described as having a sickly, yellowish hue like old brittle parchment. Their eyes, once human, sink deep into their sockets, glowing with a malevolent, feverish light, like hot coals in the dark. Their lips, cracked and bloody, are often chewed away, revealing long, jagged teeth and a black, swollen tongue. A constant foul odor of decay and rot clings to them, a stench that precedes them on the wind. But the most defining feature of this new being is its heart. The heart of a Wendigo is said to be made of pure ice. This frozen core chills them from the inside out, no matter how much they consume. This is why they are often associated with winter. They are the embodiment of its merciless, unfeeling cold. This inner frost drives them to a perpetual frantic hunt, a quest for warmth that can only be found in the flesh and blood of the living. As the transformation completes, the last vestiges of the person they once were are erased. Their memories, their love for their family, their very identity, are swallowed by the monstrous appetite. They become a Wendigo, an entity driven by a single horrifying impulse, to hunt and to consume. They are forever cursed to wander the frozen wilderness, a walking embodiment of starvation, their own hunger growing with every victim they claim. The creature's name itself is a cry of anguish, a warning passed down through generations. They are masters of mimicry. A Wendigo can perfectly imitate the cries of a lost child, the voice of a loved one, or the panicked shouts of a fellow hunter, luring unsuspecting victims deeper into the woods, away from the safety of the firelight. They are said to move with the speed of the wind, silently stalking their prey through the dense forests, their unnaturally long limbs allowing them to glide through the snow without a sound. Some accounts claim they can control the weather, summoning blizzards to isolate their chosen targets. The psychological terror they inflict is as potent as their physical threat. Those who have claimed to survive an encounter speak of a creeping dread that precedes the creature's arrival. An unnatural silence falls over the forest. The birds stop singing, and a palpable sense of being watched descends. They speak of a madness that seeps into the mind, a Wendigo fever, where even those who haven't committed the taboo act are filled with a sudden horrifying urge for human flesh, a psychic infection spread by the monster's mere presence. This is the punishment. The Wendigo is not a monster you can simply slay with a silver bullet or a wooden stake. It is a cursed human, a cautionary tale made flesh. It represents the idea that some lines once crossed can never be uncrossed. The act of cannibalism, born of desperation, creates an eternal cycle of that same desperation. The Wendigo is forever starving, forever cold, forever alone, an eternal echo of the desperate choice that birthed it. It is a physical manifestation of a spiritual crime, Shamans and medicine people, the Wendigo slayers, were the only ones who knew how to combat this terror. The methods were perilous and shrouded in ritual. It was believed that the only way to truly destroy a Wendigo was to melt its heart of ice. This often involved luring the creature into a trap and setting it ablaze. The Wendigo would scream and thrash, its cries a horrifying mix of human agony and beastly rage as the flames consumed it. Only when the heart was completely melted, reduced to ash and steam, was the curse finally broken. The spirit would be released, and the land, for a time, would be cleansed of its presence. But the legend persists because the conditions that create it never truly disappear. Every harsh winter, every story of people lost in the wilderness, every pang of hunger felt in isolation, carries with it the faint, chilling echo of the Wendigo's birth. It serves as a stark reminder that the deepest darkness doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it is unlocked from within, born from a single terrible choice made in the heart of a merciless winter. The forest remembers, the wind still carries the whispers, and the hunger is eternal. It is said that even hearing the stories, speaking the name too often, can draw its attention, that somewhere out in the vast cold emptiness, its head might turn, its glowing eyes might fix on a new source of warmth, and it will begin to move, silent as falling snow, driven by the insatiable craving that defines its very existence. The creature is a lesson written in blood and bone, a warning that the monster we should fear most is the one that sleeps within ourselves, waiting for the cold and the hunger to awaken it. The spirit is patient. It has been wandering these lands since time immemorial, and it will continue to wander long after we are gone, forever searching, forever consuming. The metamorphosis is said to begin subtly, a chilling whisper in the heart of winter when the larder is bare and the fire burns low. It starts not with a monster's roar but with a human whimper. The first symptom is an insatiable hunger, a gnawing emptiness that no amount of food can fill. The eyes, once warm with life, begin to hollow out, reflecting the desolate, snow-covered landscape. A frost seems to settle deep within the bones, a cold that no blanket can warm, a cold that emanates from the soul itself. This is the transformation, the slow, agonizing descent into the creature known as the Wendigo. Tribal elders spoke of it in hushed tones, a cautionary tale whispered around flickering fires. They said the change was a spiritual sickness, a poison that seeped into a person who had resorted to the ultimate taboo to survive. The heart freezes over, becoming a shard of ice. The voice, once used for stories and songs, roughens and deepens, echoing with a singular, desperate word: hunger. The afflicted person would withdraw, seeking solitude in the deep woods, their movements becoming furtive, their gaze shifting and paranoid. They'd start to forget the faces of their loved ones, the memories of warmth and kinship dissolving like snowflakes on a hot stone. The physical changes follow the spiritual decay. The skin stretches taut over elongating bones, taking on an ashen, deathly pallor. The lips crack and pull back from teeth that sharpen into points. Fingers and toes lengthen into talons, perfect for gripping frozen earth and tearing through flesh. Accounts from the Anishinaabe and Cree peoples describe the creature as gaunt to the point of emaciation, yet impossibly tall, towering over the tallest of men, its skeletal frame a mockery of its former human shape. It moves with a terrifying speed, a silent, gliding horror that flits between the ancient pines. They say you can smell it before you see it, the scent of decay and rot, a cloying sweetness that hangs heavy in the frigid air, a smell that signals its unnatural presence. Hunters who have ventured too deep into its territory and survived speak of this odor as the first warning. It's a primal signal to turn back, to flee the encroaching dread. But for many, curiosity or desperation outweighs fear. Settlers, unfamiliar with the ancient warnings of the land, would often press on, searching for lost game or a path through the unending forest. Consider the case of the Bisset party in the winter of 1879. A family of 7, they were last seen heading into the dense forests north of what is now Ontario. They were well-supplied, experienced trappers. But as the blizzards raged, they vanished. A search party sent out weeks later found their cabin empty, the fire long dead. A single set of tracks led away from the cabin. Tracks that were disturbingly large, humanoid but elongated, with deep claw marks gouging the snow. The tracks didn't belong to a bear or any known animal. They followed the trail for miles until it simply disappeared, as if the being that made them had taken to the sky. The Bisset family was never seen again. Or what of the lone prospector, Jean Labadie, who disappeared from his claim in northern Quebec in 1907? His journal, found in his hastily abandoned shack, tells a chilling story. The last entries are a frantic scrawl. He writes of a constant, gnawing hunger, a craving for something more than the salted meat and hardtack he had packed. He describes seeing a tall, gaunt figure watching him from the tree line, its eyes like burning coals in the twilight. His final entry is almost illegible, a single repeated phrase, "So hungry, so cold." When a rescue team found the camp, they also found Labadie's axe, caked with something dark and frozen, lying near a scattering of gnawed bones that were later determined to be human. The creature's hunger is not merely for flesh, but for life itself. It is said that with every human it consumes, it grows larger, stronger, but the hunger is never sated. It is an eternal craving, a black hole of want that drives it relentlessly through the frozen wilderness. It is a solitary hunter, a pariah cast out from both the human and animal worlds. The transformation strips away everything: family, memory, compassion, leaving only a hollow shell animated by pure, ravenous need. Its very presence is said to bring on colder weather, to deepen the snows, to make the winter more bitter and unforgiving. It is the embodiment of winter's cruelest aspect: starvation. The psychological terror is as potent as the physical threat. Those who have encountered the Wendigo and lived often speak of its voice. It can mimic the cry of a baby, the shout of a lost friend, any sound that might lure a person out into the cold, away from the safety of the fire. It plays on our deepest instincts to help, to connect, twisting them into a deadly trap. It is a master of mimicry, its calls echoing through the silent woods, a phantom promise of companionship that leads only to a gruesome end. Imagine hearing your brother's voice calling your name from the darkness, a voice you haven't heard in years, a voice filled with urgency. Do you go? Do you answer? The historical record is peppered with accounts that align eerily with the Wendigo legend. During the harsh winters of the 18th and 19th centuries, isolated forts and settlements would report strange occurrences. Sentries would vanish from their posts without a sound. Hunting parties would leave and never return. Sometimes a lone survivor would stumble back to civilization, raving about a spirit of the lonely places, a tall, skeletal demon that hunted them through the snow. These men were often dismissed as mad, their minds broken by the isolation and hardship, but their stories, shared across decades and vast distances, were unnervingly consistent. One of the most disturbing aspects of the transformation is the idea that the human spirit, the person that was, remains trapped inside. Some legends claim that the Wendigo weeps as it consumes its victims, a frozen tear tracking down its ghastly face. It is aware of its own monstrousness, eternally tormented by the memories of its lost humanity. This makes it not just a monster, but a tragic figure, a soul in perpetual agony. It is a prisoner in its own decaying body, driven by an impulse it cannot control, forever cursed to wander the desolate landscapes, a monument to the horrors of starvation and the fragility of the human mind. Consider the speed. Witnesses describe it moving faster than the eye can follow, a gray blur against the white snow. It doesn't run so much as it flows through the forest, its long limbs carrying it over drifts and through thickets with an unholy grace. It can scale sheer rock faces and leap from treetop to treetop, its movements silent and precise. You could be tracking a deer, feeling perfectly safe, and in the blink of an eye, the forest falls silent. The bird stops singing. An unnatural chill drops the temperature by 10 degrees. And then you feel the eyes on you, the pressure of a predator that has been stalking you for miles, waiting for the perfect moment. There are stories of communities that had to deal with one of their own who was beginning to turn, a family member or a close friend, showing the first signs, the distant eyes, the obsessive talk of hunger, the sudden aversion to firelight. The decision they faced was an impossible one. They were caught between love for the person they knew and terror of the thing they were becoming. The creature's greatest power lies not in its claws or its speed, but in its origin. It isn't a beast born of the wild. It is born from us. It is what we can become when stripped of our civilization, our morals, our humanity. It is the dark potential that lurks in the human heart when faced with the ultimate desperation. It's the fear of what you might do to survive. And in the dead of a long, unforgiving winter, when the wind howls like a starving man and the shadows in the trees seem to twist and lengthen, that fear feels chillingly close. The transformation is a slow poison, and once it begins, there is no known cure. The individual is lost, consumed by a hunger that will never end, their humanity a fading echo in the vast, cold emptiness of the northern woods. They become another ghost story, another whispered warning for those who dare to venture into the deep wilderness when the world is frozen and the food is gone. The person they were is gone, replaced by an insatiable, horrifying appetite, a hollow vessel of want, its heart frozen, its eyes seeing only the next meal. Its movements are swift and silent as it closes in, its presence a cold spot in the air, its breath a cloud of frost in the moonlight. You don't see it until it's too late. You only hear the snap of a twig behind you, and by then, its elongated, shadowy form is already upon you. Its gaunt face the last thing you will ever see. The hunger is eternal, and the winter is long. The change doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, creeping erosion of the self, a frost that settles deep within the bones, long before the winter snows arrive. The first sign is often the eyes. Friends and family would notice a hollowness, a vacant stare where warmth and recognition once lived. It's as if the soul is slowly packing its bags, preparing for a long journey away from the body it once called home. Then comes the silence. A person who once filled the room with laughter and stories now sits quiet, their gaze fixed on some distant point only they can see. Their heart, once a drumbeat of life, grows quiet, muffled by an internal winter. This isn't a simple descent into madness. It's a transformation, a metamorphosis into something else, something that the old Algonquian tribes spoke of in hushed tones, a tale told to frighten children into staying close to the fire. They called it the Wendigo, the spirit of the lonely places. They said it was born from a terrible hunger, a desperation so profound it would lead a person to break the ultimate taboo. But others believed it was a sickness of the soul, a curse carried on the biting winter wind that could infect anyone whose heart was touched by ice. The voice is the last thing to change, but the most terrifying. It deepens, cracks, and eventually becomes an echo of its former self, tinged with a guttural, insatiable hunger. It's a voice that doesn't speak words, but needs, a raw, primal sound that chills you to the core. The elders said you wouldn't even need to hear it to know one was near. They claimed these beings could smell the warmth of your blood, the beat of your heart, from a mile away. The scent of life was like a dinner bell, drawing them out from the frozen shadows of the forest. Consider the case of the Dubois Party, a group of French-Canadian fur trappers who overwintered in the northern woods in 1788. They were seasoned men, well supplied and familiar with the brutal realities of the Canadian winter. When the spring thaw came and they failed to return to the trading post, a search party was dispatched. They found the camp in disarray. The cabin was ransacked, supplies scattered, but there were no signs of a struggle. No blood, no tracks of a bear or wolf pack, just the footprints of the trappers themselves, leading away from the cabin in different directions deep into the woods. The men were never seen again. But for years afterward, other trappers reported seeing tall, gaunt figures moving through the trees at dusk, their limbs impossibly long, their movements unnatural and jerky. Or the story of the Williamson homestead, established in the Minnesota Territory in 1862. A family of 5, father, mother, and 3 young children. Their nearest neighbor, miles away, grew concerned after weeks of silence. When he finally rode over, he found the cabin door swinging in the wind. Inside, the fire was long dead, a thin layer of snow covering the floor. The family was gone, but what was truly unsettling was what he found in the parents' bedroom. Scratched into the floorboards over and over were the words, "So hungry." Later that spring, a survey team working miles to the north found a lone set of disturbingly large, human-like tracks. Following them, they discovered a makeshift shelter of branches. Inside were the tattered remnants of the Williamsons' clothing and a collection of bones, some animal, some not. They were all gnawed clean. The change strips away everything. Memories of family, the comfort of a warm fire, the concept of love or mercy. It's all scoured away by the relentless, gnawing emptiness. The body begins to change too. The skin stretches tight over bones that seem to grow, elongating the limbs. The nails thicken into claws, the teeth sharpen. It's a physical manifestation of the spiritual decay within. An 1895 journal entry from a missionary near Lake of the Woods describes encountering a local man he knew, Jean-Pierre. The man had vanished from his village weeks earlier, after his family had perished from sickness. The missionary wrote, "I saw him at the edge of the clearing. It was Jean-Pierre, but it was not. He was taller than I remembered, skeletal. His eyes were pits of shadow, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. He did not recognize me. He only looked at me with an awful, terrible hunger. I fled, and I do not believe I have ever prayed so hard in my life." This transformation is not a choice. It's a surrender, a giving into the despair that the deep, dark woods can breed. Think of the isolation, the crushing cold, the gnawing hunger of a failed hunt. It's in these moments of absolute desperation that the door creaks open. The frost seeps in not just through the cracks in the cabin walls, but through the cracks in the human spirit. The metamorphosis is a cautionary tale, whispered around campfires for centuries. A reminder that the wilderness has its own laws, its own ancient spirits, and that humanity is a fragile thing, easily lost. There are accounts from the logging camps of the early 20th century. Big, strong men who worked from sunup to sundown, suddenly becoming withdrawn and morose. They'd stop eating, claiming the food tasted like ash. They'd spend hours staring into the dark woods, muttering to themselves. The other loggers, superstitious and fearful, would often just drive the afflicted man out of camp, leaving him to his fate. Weeks later, tools would go missing, or the sled dogs would be found torn apart. And sometimes in the dead of night, they'd hear a familiar voice, twisted and distorted, calling their names from the darkness, begging to be let in. The entity that remains is a mockery of a human being. It retains just enough of its former shape to be truly terrifying. It walks on 2 legs, but its gait is all wrong. It has a face, but the features are stretched and gaunt, the mouth locked in a rictus of eternal starvation. It is a creature of perpetual winter, its heart frozen, its touch said to be colder than ice. The stories claim they are impossibly fast and strong, driven by a single overriding impulse that has replaced all other thought: to consume, to fill the agonizing, echoing void inside them. Even in modern times, the stories persist. Hikers vanishing from well-marked trails in national parks. Search and rescue teams finding abandoned campsites with all the gear left behind. Food still in the pots. Sometimes they find a single disturbing clue, a word scratched into a tree, a piece of clothing found miles from where the person was last seen. And the local native communities, they just nod grimly. They know. They know what stalks the northern forests, what waits in the places where the shadows are deepest and the winters are longest. They know that sometimes when a person gets lost in the woods, it's not the woods they get lost in, it's themselves. The creature they become is a shell, a vessel for an ancient and terrible hunger, a hunger that is never ever satisfied. It just continues to wander the frozen wastes, eternally searching for its next meal, its eyes hollow, its heart frozen, its voice an echo of the human it once was. The transformation is complete, leaving only the hunger behind, an endless, gnawing hunger that drives it through the snow, always searching. The footprints it leaves are almost human, but just different enough to make the blood run cold. They are longer, the stride impossibly wide, and they are always alone. The metamorphosis is a solitary curse. It isolates its victim, severing all ties to their past life, until nothing is left but the monster. The accounts from the 19th century are particularly chilling, as they come from a time when people were pushing deeper into territories that had been untouched for millennia. Settlers, prospectors, and pioneers, full of hope and ambition, building their lives on the edge of a vast, unknown wilderness. For some, the wilderness pushed back. Take the journal of Elias Thorne, a homesteader in the Michigan Upper Peninsula dated 1879. He writes of his neighbor, a solitary trapper named Silas. Silas has not been himself. He has grown gaunt and pale. Yesterday he came to my door begging for flour. His eyes, they were like a wolf's, but empty. He looked at my wife, my children, with a look I cannot describe, not of malice, but of appraisal. As a butcher sizes up a hog, I gave him the flour and barred the door. I pray he does not return. Thorne's journal ends abruptly a week later. The cabin was found empty the following spring. There were deep scratches on the outside of the door, and a single large bare footprint frozen in the mud by the threshold. The smell is another consistent detail in the lore. Before you see it, before you hear it, you smell it. An odor of decay and stale meat, mixed with the cloying sweetness of rot. It's a smell that clings to the air, a warning that something unnatural is nearby. Experienced hunters and woodsmen know the scent. They know it means to turn back, to leave the area immediately and not stop until you see the clear, open sky. They know that the thing that produces that smell is no longer human, and it sees them not as fellow men but as prey. It is a thing of pure, unadulterated instinct, a walking personification of starvation, and it is always, always watching from the trees. Its forms are as varied as the landscapes it haunts. To some it appears skeletal, a walking framework of bones with skin stretched impossibly thin, taut and white like frost over a grave marker. These witnesses speak of a creature that moves with a silent, unnatural grace, its bony limbs clicking softly on the frozen earth. They describe eyes that glow like embers, two malevolent pinpricks of light in the deepening twilight, promising a cold that seeps not into your clothes, but into your very soul. The stench, they say, is unmistakable, a cloying mix of damp soil and slow decay, the smell of a forgotten tomb suddenly opened. In other sightings, particularly in the dense ancient forests of Canada, it wears a crown of antlers. Not the noble rack of a stag, but something twisted and jagged, like dead branches reaching for a perpetually gray sky. These antlers seem to absorb the light, adding to the creature's terrifying silhouette as it stands motionless at the edge of a tree line, just watching. Hunters and loggers who have seen this form describe a sense of being judged, of their very presence being an offense to the ancient woods. The creature doesn't need to move. Its stillness is more menacing than any charge. As its territory stretches south towards the Great Lakes, the descriptions shift again. Here it is often seen near the water's edge, its form semi-translucent, almost ethereal. Sailors and fishermen have reported seeing it rise from the morning mists that cling to the surface of the lakes, its shape indistinct but for the burning eyes and the emaciated, elongated limbs. It is said its cry carries across the water, a sound that is part human shriek, part the grinding of ice floes. This version is more of a specter, a memory of starvation and cold, that has been given physical form, forever bound to the desolate, wind-swept shores. The common thread through all these accounts is the profound, paralyzing cold that accompanies its presence. It's a drop in temperature so sudden and unnatural that it can crack trees and freeze the breath in your lungs. This isn't just the absence of heat. It's an active, predatory cold that drains the life and warmth from everything around it. Survivors, those few who have encountered it and lived to tell the tale, speak of this chilling effect more than anything else. They talk of how their muscles locked up, how their thoughts slowed to a crawl, and how a deep, unshakable despair settled over them, a feeling that they were already dead, their grave just waiting. In the Appalachian regions, it is a creature of the hollows and the deep mountain passes. Locals whisper tales of it being a spirit of famine, a being that awakens during the harshest winters. Its form here is often gaunt and hairless, its skin the color of bruised flesh. It is seen scavenging, not for food but for something more abstract, warmth, life, perhaps the very essence of hope. They say it can mimic voices, a faint whisper on the wind that sounds like a loved one calling for help, luring the unwary away from the safety of their homes and into the unforgiving wilderness. The sound is always just out of reach, leading you deeper and deeper into its domain, where the path back vanishes and the cold settles in for good. The creature's tracks are another point of contention and terror. Some accounts describe cloven hoof prints, but split in a way that defies the anatomy of any known animal. Others find long, dragging marks in the snow or mud, as if it's pulling something heavy, or perhaps as if its own limbs can barely support its weight. But most terrifyingly, many encounters leave no tracks at all. The creature is simply there one moment and gone the next, leaving behind only the oppressive silence, the lingering smell of the grave, and a victim's footprints that stop abruptly in the middle of a clearing, with no sign of a struggle, no sign of anything at all. It seems to be drawn to isolation and desperation. Tales from the Great Plains speak of it appearing during brutal blizzards, a gaunt figure seen moving through the whiteout. It is said to stalk lone travelers, its glowing eyes the only point of reference in the swirling snow. These accounts often end with the discovery of a frozen body, days or weeks later, with a look of sheer, unadulterated terror etched onto the face. The authorities rule it as death by exposure, but the old stories know the truth. They know what it means to see those two burning lights in the heart of a storm. There is a psychological element to its hunt. It doesn't always attack directly. Often it prefers to torment its victims. Its presence felt long before it is seen. It's the snap of a twig just outside the circle of your campfire, the fleeting shadow that your mind dismisses as a trick of the light, the sudden, irrational fear that grips you when you're alone in the wild. It feeds on this fear, growing stronger as its victim's sanity frays. By the time it finally reveals itself, its prey is already broken, paralyzed by a terror that has been building for hours or even days. This is not a creature of simple hunger. It is a manifestation of the wilderness's most primal fears: starvation, freezing to death, and the terror of being utterly alone. Its various forms may be a reflection of the land it occupies, or perhaps they reflect the specific fears of the person who sees it. The skeletal form for one who fears death and decay, the antlered form for one who fears the untamable power of nature. It becomes what you dread most. Sightings are almost always solitary. It is rarely, if ever, seen by groups. It chooses its audience carefully, preying on the individual, severing them from the herd. This is why the stories are so often dismissed as delusions, the product of a mind strained by solitude and harsh conditions. But the consistency of the descriptions, passed down through generations and across vast geographical distances, paints a picture that is too coherent to be mere folklore. From the First Nations legends of a ravenous, cannibalistic spirit to the panicked reports of modern-day campers, the entity remains the same. Its motives are a mystery. It does not seem to kill for sustenance in the traditional sense. Victims are often found intact, frozen solid, with no marks of violence upon them. It is as if their life force, their internal fire, has been snuffed out. This has led to speculation that it is a psychic parasite, feeding not on flesh but on warmth, energy, and the very spirit of its victims. It is a being of absolute entropy, a black hole of life in the shape of a nightmare. The land it touches becomes barren, the animals flee, and a palpable sense of loss hangs in the air for years to come. In the northern reaches of Quebec, it is known as a shapeshifter. The stories here are the most disturbing. They tell of the creature taking on the appearance of a fellow traveler, a member of your party who has momentarily stepped out of sight. It will walk alongside you, perhaps even speak in their voice, but something is always wrong. The eyes are too bright, the smile doesn't reach them, and the cold that emanates from it is undeniable. The true horror begins when the real person returns, and you are faced with two identical figures, forced to choose which one is your friend and which is the thing that has been hunting you. It is a creature that exists on the periphery, in the corner of your eye, in the whispers of the wind. It is the reason you feel watched when you are alone in the woods. It is the fear that makes your heart pound when you hear an unfamiliar sound in the night. It isn't just a monster. It is the embodiment of the forest's dark heart, a reminder that for all our technology and civilization, there are still places in the world where we are not at the top of the food chain. Places where the cold, hungers, and the shadows have teeth. The stories don't serve as a warning to be careful. They serve as a statement of fact. Some things are out there, and they are waiting. The silence it leaves in its wake is its most defining characteristic, a void where sound and life used to be. That silence is the true trophy of its hunt. They say the deepest, oldest forests hold secrets, secrets that predate humanity, secrets that walk on two legs and hunger. For centuries, tales have been whispered around crackling fires, stories of a gaunt, skeletal figure, its skin stretched taut over protruding bones, its eyes glowing with an insatiable malice. They called it by many names, but the essence was always the same, a spirit of the lonely places, a cannibalistic entity, born from desperation and the bitter cold. The legend warns that those who resort to eating human flesh in the wilderness become this creature, cursed to wander the woods forever, their hunger never satisfied. But these aren't just old stories. The whispers haven't faded. They've just changed their tune. Today they come not from ancient legends, but from the terrified accounts of modern-day adventurers. Campers, deep in national parks, miles from any road, report the same unsettling phenomenon. It starts subtly. A twig snaps just beyond the firelight. A shadow flits at the edge of their vision. Then comes the voice. It's faint at first, almost carried on the wind. It sounds familiar, frighteningly familiar. It's the voice of a loved one, a spouse, a child, a parent. It calls your name, laced with a desperate urgency. Help me, it might plead. I'm lost. Every instinct screams to run towards it, to find the person you care about. But the seasoned woodsmen, the park rangers who have seen too much, offer a chilling piece of advice. Stay by the fire. Never ever follow the voice. They speak of search parties, finding empty tents, sleeping bags still zipped, gear left behind as if the occupants vanished in an instant. The only clues are tracks that start human and slowly elongate, the stride becoming impossibly long, the footprints deepening as if under immense, unnatural weight. In 2018, a group of hikers in the Northern Rockies documented their harrowing experience. On their second night, one of them, a man named Ben, was woken by what he thought was his wife calling his name from just outside the tent. The problem was his wife was hundreds of miles away at home. Shaken, he woke his friends. As they sat in silence listening, they all heard it. A woman's voice, weeping, begging for help. It circled their campsite, always seeming to come from a different direction, luring them into the dark. They stayed huddled together until sunrise, too afraid to even peek outside. When dawn broke, they found deep, vertical gouges in the bark of a pine tree next to their camp, starting at a height no man or bear could possibly reach. The marks were over 10 feet off the ground. These claw marks are a recurring signature. Rangers in remote parts of Canada and the northern United States have photographed similar markings for decades. They're often found in areas where people have gone missing without a trace. The official explanation is usually a bear, but bears don't leave clean, parallel slashes that high. The patterns are more akin to something with long, sharp fingers dragging them down the trunk with immense force. It's as if something is marking its territory, or perhaps sharpening its claws. The most terrifying evidence, however, isn't what is seen, but what is heard. Across the internet, you can find audio clips recorded by frightened campers and paranormal investigators. They capture a sound that defies explanation. It's a high-pitched, unearthly shriek that echoes for miles, a sound that seems to tear through the very fabric of the night. Some say it sounds like a woman's scream, distorted and amplified to an impossible volume. Others describe it as the cry of a large animal in agony. Listen, this is one such recording captured in the forests of Ontario. The individual who recorded it claimed the sound went on for nearly an hour, moving closer and then farther away, a horrifying game of auditory cat and mouse. Biologists have been unable to identify any known animal capable of producing such a vocalization. It doesn't match the call of a cougar, a moose, or any species of bird. It is something else entirely, something that, according to the old tales, mimics the screams of its victims. The psychological toll on those who encounter it is profound. A veteran hunter, a man who had spent over 40 years in the backwoods of Minnesota, abandoned his lifelong passion after one night. He was alone in his cabin when he heard a frantic knocking on his door. Peeking through the window, he saw nothing. The knocking continued, more frantic, more desperate. Then he heard his own voice, clear as day, calling from the darkness. "Let me in," it said. "It's cold out here." He spent the rest of the night with his back against the door, rifle in hand, listening as his own voice begged, pleaded, and eventually began to laugh, a cold, hollow sound that he said wasn't human. He sold the cabin the following week and never returned to the woods. This mimicry is its most insidious tool. It doesn't just hunt the body, it hunts the mind. It preys on our deepest connections, our instinct to protect and rescue those we love. It turns compassion into a fatal weakness. Imagine hearing your child's voice crying for you from the impenetrable blackness of the forest. The emotional agony, the desperate pull to go to them, is almost impossible to resist. That is the trap. The creature knows our attachments. It learns. Recent theories suggest it's not just a creature of winter and starvation anymore. With more people venturing into its domain, it has adapted. It is a territorial predator, and we are encroaching. The claw marks are warnings. The disembodied voices are lures. The screams are a declaration of its presence. It is an apex predator that has remained hidden simply because most who encounter it do not live to tell the tale. The few who do are often dismissed, their stories relegated to campfire tales and internet forums. But the evidence continues to mount. Unexplained disappearances in national parks, claw marks that defy logic, and those terrifying, unidentifiable screams echoing through the night. The creature is not just a legend from a forgotten time. It is a living, breathing entity that shares the deep woods with us. It watches from the shadows, its gaunt frame hidden behind the ancient trees. It listens to our conversations, learning our names, our voices, and it waits. It waits for that moment when you are alone, when the fire burns low and the darkness presses in. It waits to call your name in a voice you trust, a voice you love. It is a perfect hunter, patient and intelligent. It knows that sooner or later someone will always answer the call. The forest is vast and its hunger is eternal. It's out there, right now, moving silently through the trees, listening. The next voice it learns could be yours. It's a master of imitation, and its repertoire is growing with every new visitor to its domain. The rangers will tell you to stay on the trails, to never hike alone. But what they don't say is that sometimes the trail isn't enough to keep you safe. Sometimes the thing in the woods decides it wants to play, and its games are always lethal. The sheer number of experienced hikers and hunters who go missing each year is staggering, And in a percentage of those cases, no body, no gear, not a single trace is ever found. They are simply erased from the landscape, gone. It's as if they stepped off the path and were swallowed whole by the forest itself. And in the silence that follows their disappearance, sometimes late at night, a new voice joins the chorus in the dark. It's a fever of the soul, one that settles in when the last embers of the fire die and the vast oppressive darkness of the ancient woods presses in. They call it the Wendigo fever. It begins subtly, a flicker in the periphery. Was that a branch snapping? Or the crack of a bone? A shadow that seems to dart just beyond the reach of the firelight. You tell yourself it's just your mind playing tricks, the exhaustion of being lost, the gnawing emptiness in your stomach twisting your senses. But then the faces start to appear, etched into the bark of ancient oaks, their eyes hollow, mouths agape in a silent eternal scream. You see them in the shifting patterns of the leaves, in the ripples of a moonlit pond. They are gaunt, skeletal visages, their features stretched and distorted by an unimaginable suffering. At first you dismiss them. Pareidolia, the mind's tendency to find patterns where none exist, a natural response to stress and isolation. But the faces become more distinct, more persistent. They seem to follow you, the same elongated skull, the same sunken eyes, appearing on tree after tree as you stumble deeper into the wilderness. That's when the whispers begin, not from the wind, but from a place just behind your own thoughts. They speak of an insatiable craving, a desperate, maddening hunger that no amount of food could ever satisfy. The voice is thin, reedy, like the whine of a winter wind through a rotted cabin. It promises warmth. It promises an end to the gnawing ache in your gut. It promises power. All you have to do is give in. All you have to do is eat. The scent of game on the wind no longer smells like sustenance. It smells like a temptation you must resist. The very thought of meat becomes both abhorrent and desperately alluring. You start to see it more clearly now. No longer just a face in the bark, a tall, emaciated figure, its limbs unnaturally long and spindly, moving with a horrifying speed between the trees. Its skin is the color of ash, stretched taut over a skeletal frame. Some say its heart is made of ice, and you believe it, because a coldness settles deep in your bones that no fire can warm. It is a thing of famine, a being born of the desperate winter and the starvation that follows. It is the embodiment of that moment when a human being, pushed to the absolute limit, casts aside their humanity for survival. The true horror of the Wendigo isn't just the creature that stalks the woods, it's the thing it represents. It is a mirror held up to the darkest potential within ourselves. When civilization is stripped away, when the rules no longer apply, when survival is the only law, what are we capable of? The Wendigo is the answer to that question. It is the cannibalistic spirit of the lonely places, the personification of the taboo that separates us from the beasts. Those who succumb to the fever, they don't just die, they become. Their humanity is scoured away, replaced by that single driving impulse to consume. You find yourself looking at your own reflection in a still pool of water, and for a terrifying second, you don't recognize the person staring back. Your face looks thinner, your eyes wider, wilder. The hunger is a living thing inside you now, a parasite chewing on your soul. You can feel your own limbs begin to feel alien, elongated. Is your skin turning pale? Or is it just the moonlight? The whispers are louder, more insistent. They tell you that you are alone, that no one is coming for you, that the only way to survive is to embrace the cold, to embrace the hunger, to become the hunter in the dark. The fever is taking hold. The Wendigo's curse is not a simple bite or scratch. It is a psychological infection, a madness that blooms in the fertile ground of despair and isolation. It finds the cracks in your spirit and pries them open. It feeds on your fear, on your loneliness, on the primal terror of starving to death in a cold, indifferent wilderness. The creature doesn't always need to hunt you down. Sometimes, all it has to do is wait. It waits for your hope to curdle into desperation. It waits for your morality to fray It waits for you to become so hollowed out by hunger and fear that you become a vessel ready to be filled by its own ravenous spirit. You cover your ears, but the whispers are inside your head now. The faces in the trees are no longer just faces, they are invitations. Each one a former soul who made the same choice you're now facing. They beckon you to join them, to shed the weakness of your flesh and become something more, something eternal. The lines blur. Is the creature hunting you? Or is it calling to a part of you that has been dormant all along? The part of humanity that in the most extreme circumstances is willing to do the unthinkable. The woods fall silent, and you can feel its presence right behind you. The cold emanating from it is absolute. It doesn't have to touch you. It knows the fever is already doing its work. The hunger is everything now. And as you turn, you see not a monster, but a reflection of your own future, gaunt and terrible and starving. The Wendigo is not just something you see, it's something you become. You can feel your bones beginning to shift, your skin tightening over them. The final vestiges of your humanity are burning away like frost in the morning sun, replaced by a cold, endless winter, and a hunger that will never, ever be satisfied. It's a hunger for more than just flesh. It's a hunger for warmth, for life itself. A ravenous void that seeks to consume everything until only it remains, stalking the silent snow-covered forest, forever hunting, forever starving. The cycle continues. Another soul lost to the great woods. Another voice joining the whispering wind. Another set of eyes watching from the darkness. And the final audio log from the Northern Minnesota Paranormal Society is perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence ever recovered. The recording, dated February 1998, captures lead investigator David Chen's voice, strained and breathless. He's whispering, "It's been 3 days. We haven't seen it, but we hear it. The sound, it's like ice cracking and bone snapping all at once. It mimics us. Last night it whispered Sarah's name from just outside the tree line. Sarah's been gone for 2 days." The log then records a high-pitched, inhuman shriek that distorts the audio before cutting out. When the search party found their campsite a week later, the tents were shredded from the outside, and a single set of frostbitten, bare footprints led from the camp deep into the snow-covered forest, then simply stopped. No drag marks, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the person who made them had been plucked straight up into the sky. This pattern is terrifyingly consistent. Go back to 1976, the case of the Algoma Spectre Seekers, a group of 4 university students from Ontario. Their goal was to document the Wendigo legend in the dense forests north of Lake Superior. Their last communication was a garbled radio transmission. The operator on the other end reported hearing what sounded like static, then a clear, calm voice saying, "It's so tall. It's wearing my friend's face." Then, silence. Their vehicle was found abandoned on a remote logging road, doors wide open, engine cold. Inside, the camera equipment was untouched, but the film had been exposed, burned by a bright, unknown light source. The only clue was a single blurry photograph recovered from a damaged roll. It shows a clearing in the woods. In the background, partially obscured by the trees, is a tall, emaciated figure. Its limbs are unnaturally long, its form skeletal. Even in the poor quality of the image, you can make out something that looks like antlers, or perhaps branches, growing from its head. Then there's the infamous Blackwood expedition of 2011. This was a well-funded, highly experienced team of cryptid hunters equipped with state-of-the-art thermal imaging and audio recording devices. Their live-streamed updates from the wilds of northern Quebec initially showed nothing but serene, snow-covered landscapes, but on day 5 the tone shifted. Their thermal cameras started picking up a heat signature that defied explanation. It was tall, impossibly thin, and moved at speeds their expert tracker said were impossible for any known animal, especially in deep snow. It registered as colder than the surrounding environment, an anomaly that shouldn't be possible. The team's final transmission was a frantic video call. The footage is shaky, disoriented. You can hear panicked shouting. "It's in the camp! It's moving between the trees! Don't look at it!" The camera pans wildly, catching a fleeting, blurred image of a pale, lanky form moving with disjointed, horrifying speed. The last thing the footage shows is one of the team members turning the camera on himself, his face a mask of pure terror, as he screams, "It knows my name! Oh God, it knows my name!" The feed cut out. No bodies were ever found. All that was left was a campsite that looked like it had been hit by a tornado, and a single, strange artifact, a deer skull crudely painted, with a spiral symbol placed neatly on the packed-down snow in the center of the camp. What connects these disappearances is the psychological element. The Wendigo isn't just a predator, it's a tormentor. Survivors of near-miss encounters, the few who have made it back, all speak of a profound, unnatural sense of despair that descends upon the area. They report hearing the voices of loved ones calling for help from the woods, phantom smells of rotting meat, and a constant gnawing hunger that isn't their own. It's a psychological assault designed to break the will, to lure victims into isolation. Consider the journal of Alara Vance, a lone hiker who vanished in the Nahanni Valley in 2003. Her diary was found a year later, preserved by the cold. Her early entries are filled with wonder at the landscape, but the final pages are a descent into madness. She writes, "The hunger won't stop. It's not for food. It's for something more. I saw it last night. It has my brother's eyes. Told me if I just walked a little further, the cold would stop. It promised me warmth." Her last entry is a single scrawled sentence. "The snow is so warm." Her footprints led to the edge of a frozen river and vanished. The digital age has only provided more haunting fragments. In 2018, a team known as Truth Trackers went into the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. They were live blogging their investigation. Their last post included a sound file. It's 30 seconds of what experts call electronic voice phenomenon, or EVP. Amidst the static, a low guttural voice can be clearly heard. It says, "Come out, it's so quiet in the woods." A follower commented asking if they were all right. There was never a reply. The team's SUV was found, but all their gear, cameras, laptops, phones, was gone. The only thing left behind was their tents, each one with a long single tear down the side, as if a giant claw had swiped through it. Local law enforcement noted the strange absence of any animal tracks around the campsite. No wolves, no bears, not even squirrels. It was as if every living thing had fled the area in terror. One of the most disturbing pieces of evidence comes from a recovered GoPro camera belonging to a solo adventurer named Ben Carter, who disappeared in Manitoba in 2015. The camera was found attached to a helmet, wedged in the branches of a tall pine tree, nearly 40 feet off the ground. Most of the footage was corrupted, but a few salvageable clips remain. One clip shows Ben nervously scanning the tree line with his flashlight. He whispers, "I swear something is mirroring me. Every time I move, it moves." Another clip, apparently from later that night, is shot from inside his tent. All you can hear is his ragged breathing and a faint, rhythmic tapping on the outside of the tent fabric. Tap, tap, tap. It goes on for 3 minutes, then stops. The final recovered clip is chaos. The camera is pointing straight up at the canopy of the tent. Suddenly, the fabric is ripped open violently, and for a split second, the camera captures a gaunt, pale face with hollow black eyes looking down. The face is framed by what appears to be a rack of yellowed, deer-like antlers. Then the camera is flung through the air, tumbling end over end, capturing glimpses of the dark forest canopy before it impacts with the branch where it was eventually found. The legend speaks of the Wendigo as a spirit of insatiable greed and hunger, a human transformed by desperation into a monster. But these accounts suggest something more, something ancient and intelligent. It doesn't just hunt, it plays with its prey. It learns their names, mimics their loved ones, and uses their deepest fears against them. It's a psychological predator as much as a physical one. The recovered evidence, the audio logs filled with whispers, the blurry photos of an unnaturally tall figure, the final terrified video transmissions, all paint a picture of an entity that is not only real, but is actively and successfully hunting those who dare to hunt it. The frostbitten footprints that lead nowhere aren't a sign of someone getting lost. They are the final mark of someone being taken, erased from the landscape by a force that defies our understanding of the natural world. In every case, the searchers become the searched, and the wilderness keeps its secrets. The torn tents and silent campsites are the only monuments left for the Wendigo hunters, who never returned. Their recordings are their headstones, eerie warnings left behind for anyone who thinks the legends are just stories. The evidence is clear. Something is out there in the cold, dark woods, and it's hungry. These rituals, passed down through generations, were not meant to harm or destroy the entity, but to placate it, to push it back into the shadows from which it came. They spoke of cleansing ceremonies, held under the cold light of the winter moon. Elders would lead processions through the snow-swept villages, their voices chanting ancient words that echoed off the frozen pines. The air would grow thick with the smoke of smudging fires, burning bundles of sacred herbs like sage, cedar, and sweetgrass. This smoke wasn't just for show. It was believed to be a physical barrier, a spiritual wall that the creature could not or would not cross. The scent would cling to clothes, to homes, to the very air for days, a constant fragrant reminder of the warding. Offerings were another crucial part of the appeasement. These weren't grand gestures, but small, personal sacrifices, a portion of a hunter's first kill of the season left at the edge of the forest, a carefully woven pouch of tobacco and herbs placed in the hollow of an ancient tree, a bowl of berries and nuts left on a secluded flat rock deep in the woods. These gifts were a sign of respect, an acknowledgement of the creature's domain. It was a bargain, a silent treaty. We respect your world, so please, stay out of ours. The offerings would always be gone by morning, taken either by the entity or the forest itself. No one ever dared to wait and see. The specifics of these rituals vary from one community to another, whispered fragments of a larger, terrifying puzzle. Some tales describe the use of specific symbols drawn in ash or animal fat on the thresholds of homes and barns. These weren't complex sigils, but simple, stark lines and circles, designs believed to disrupt its path, to confuse its senses. Other accounts mention the use of sound, the rhythmic beating of drums carved from hollowed logs, or the haunting melody of flutes made from bird bones, played throughout the longest, darkest nights of the year to fill the silence and keep the unknown at bay. It was a symphony of defense, a concert of survival. Even the construction of dwellings was influenced by the fear of this thing. Old stories claim that certain homes were built with no windows facing the deep woods, or with doors intentionally misaligned. These weren't architectural quirks. They were deliberate defenses. A window facing the forest was seen as an open invitation, a clear view into the warmth and light of the home. A misaligned door was thought to create a spirit trap, an obstacle that a being of its nature would find difficult to navigate. These architectural anomalies can still be found in some of the oldest remaining structures in these remote areas, silent testaments to a fear that has shaped the very landscape. The fear is not just of the creature itself, but of what it represents, the vast, unknowable wilderness and the things that stir within it. It's the embodiment of the cold, the hunger, and the isolation of the deep north. The rituals were as much about stealing the community's spirit as they were about warding off a physical threat. They brought people together, reinforcing bonds in the face of a shared, unspoken dread. The act of participation was an act of defiance, a statement that they wouldn't be consumed by the darkness at their doorstep. But the most pervasive and powerful ritual of all is the silence. The deepest fear is that merely speaking of the entity, uttering its name, or even describing it in too much detail, acts as a summons. The belief is that words have power, and to speak of it is to give it form, to draw its attention from the deep woods toward the sound of your voice. It's like lighting a beacon in the dark. This is why the stories are always fragmented, told in hushed tones and with averted eyes. It's why names are avoided, replaced with euphemisms like the tall one, the gray walker, or simply it. Even today, in some of these isolated northern communities, this tradition of silence holds strong. Outsiders who ask too many questions are met with stony glares or polite but firm deflections. Elders will change the subject, their faces hardening at the mention of local legends. Children are taught from a young age not to speak of the thing that walks in the woods, not to joke about it, not to even think its name too loudly. It is a taboo woven into the very fabric of their culture. This silence is the ultimate act of self-preservation, a ritual practiced every single day. They believe the creature is patient, that it listens, and that it waits for an invitation. Loggers and trappers who spend weeks alone in the wilderness have their own, more personal rituals. Many refuse to whistle after dark, believing the sound mimics the calls of birds and might attract unwanted attention. They make it a point to never step over a fallen log without first tapping it with their foot, or an axe handle a small gesture to announce their presence and show they mean no disrespect to the spirits of the woods. They meticulously clean their campsites, leaving no trace, not just for environmental reasons, but to avoid leaving anything that might be seen as an offering or an invitation. They speak of a feeling, a palpable sense of being watched from just beyond the tree line, a pressure in the air that signals it's time to pack up and move on. They don't question it. They just obey that primal instinct. The stories persist, of course, because sometimes the rituals fail or are forgotten. A young person, dismissive of the old ways, speaks the name aloud as a joke. A newcomer to the area dismisses the warnings as simple folklore, and then things begin to happen. Unexplained tracks appear in the snow, too large and too deep for any known animal. The sound of something heavy pacing just outside the cabin walls at night. The distinct, chilling crack of a massive tree branch breaking in the dead, still, frozen air. Livestock disappears from locked barns without a single sign of forced entry. The only evidence a strange, musky scent lingering in the morning air. These incidents serve as grim reminders, reinforcing the necessity of the ancient practices. They are fresh fuel for the fear that smolders just beneath the surface of daily life. After such an event, the smudging fires burn brighter, the chants are louder, and the silence becomes deeper, more profound. The community draws in on itself, renewing its pact with the traditions that have kept them safe for centuries. They know the creature is not gone, merely pushed back. It is always there, at the edge of their perception, a silent, looming presence in the vast, ancient forests of the north. They don't need to see it to know it's there. They can feel it in the sudden drop in temperature, in the unnatural silence of the woods, when all the birds and insects suddenly go quiet. They know it's listening, and they know it's waiting. The rituals are their only defense, a fragile shield of belief and tradition against a darkness that has been there long before them and will remain long after they are gone. It's a constant, vigilant effort to keep it away, to maintain the delicate balance between their world and its, a balance that could be shattered by a single spoken word. The files are heavily redacted, of course. Pages of black ink hide names, locations, and mission parameters, but what they can't hide is the pattern. A series of sudden, unexplained forest closures across North America stretching back decades. The official story is always the same: controlled burns, wildlife surveys, or geological instability, plausible deniability. But when you cross-reference these closures with local reports, a much darker picture emerges. Reports of missing hikers, unsettling howls in the night, and strange, gaunt figures seen at the edge of the tree line. Take the infamous Operation Deep Freeze of 1978. A vast expanse of boreal forest in northern Ontario was sealed off for 6 months. The official reason was an aggressive spruce budworm infestation. But retired Air Force personnel from a nearby base tell a different story off the record. They speak of strange radio chatter, of specialized teams being flown in under the cover of darkness, not with pesticides but with high-caliber weapons and thermal imaging gear. They talk about a quarantine zone not for insects, but for something else. Something that moved with unnatural speed. Something that left tracks that were almost human, but too long, too thin, with claws that dug deep into the frozen earth. These incidents aren't isolated. Look at the Coconino National Forest closure in Arizona, 1992. Unprecedented wildfire risk, the bulletin said, yet there had been no drought. In fact, it was an unusually wet season. What there had been, however, were a dozen calls to the sheriff's office in the preceding weeks, all describing the same thing: a tall, emaciated creature stalking livestock, its eyes glowing in the dark. The official reports label these as probable mountain lion sightings. But mountain lions don't walk on two legs. They don't mimic human voices to lure people deeper into the woods, a detail that appears repeatedly in witness statements before the area was abruptly locked down by federal agents. The connection to military bases is undeniable. Many of these classified wildlife operations take place alarmingly close to secretive military installations. Fort Wainwright in Alaska, adjacent to vast untamed wilderness. The base has one of the highest rates of personnel going missing on recreational excursions in the entire U.S. military. The official cause is always exposure or animal attacks. But what kind of animal eviscerates its victim, yet consumes almost nothing? What kind of animal can withstand the brutal Alaskan winter with no apparent fur, its skin stretched taut over a skeletal frame? Soldiers stationed there whisper stories of the Alaskan ghost, a name they use for the Wendigo. They talk about sentries on watch who have fired their weapons at fleeting shapes in the woods, only to find no tracks, no blood, just an unnerving silence and a lingering scent of decay. The government's response is always swift and absolute: information control. Any local law enforcement or park ranger who gets too close to the truth is reassigned or forced into early retirement with a generous pension and a non-disclosure agreement. Journalists asking too many questions find their sources drying up, their access revoked. It's a well-oiled machine designed to suppress a truth they believe the public cannot handle. Consider the declassified documents from the Project Winterlore initiative in the 1960s. Framed as an anthropological study of native folklore, its true purpose was far more sinister. The project's lead anthropologist, a name you won't find in any academic journal, dedicated his life to mapping every single story, every single sighting of the Wendigo. His field notes, what little remains unredacted, are chilling. He doesn't treat it as myth. He treats it as a biological entity. He theorizes about its hibernation cycles, its hunting patterns, its territorial range. He speculates that it's not a single creature, but a species that has learned to fear and avoid humanity, but whose hunger, an insatiable, maddening hunger, sometimes drives it into our world. One particularly disturbing entry details an encounter relayed by an Ojibwe elder. It describes how the creature can wear the voice of someone you know, replaying a cry for help to draw you away from the safety of the campfire. It speaks of its speed, faster than a running deer, and its unnatural strength. The anthropologist's notes in the margin are frantic. Validate this. Triangulate with sighting reports from Quebec. Is vocal mimicry a predatory adaptation? Possible psionic influence? This isn't folklore. This is threat analysis. Why the secrecy? What did they discover that warranted this level of containment for over half a century? The most terrifying theory isn't that they're hunting it, but that they failed to contain it. The forest closures, the military operations, they aren't proactive measures. They're reactive. They're cleanup crews. They move in after an incident, after the creature has fed and moved on, to erase the evidence and silence the witnesses. Think about the sheer logistics. Specialized teams on permanent standby. A media blackout protocol that can be enacted at a moment's notice. A network of embedded agents in local and state park services. This isn't for managing bears or wolves. This is the kind of infrastructure you build to manage an existential threat. A predator that sits at the top of the food chain, with humanity as its prey. There are whispers in the conspiracy community of a capture and study program gone wrong. A facility, deep underground, somewhere in the remote Nevada desert or the Alaskan tundra, where one of these creatures was held. They wanted to understand its biology, perhaps even weaponize its unique characteristics. The story goes that it escaped, or worse, that it communicated with others of its kind, that the increase in sightings and forest closures since the late 90s is not a coincidence. It's retaliation. Look at the patterns in missing persons cases, specifically within national parks that border these closure zones. The official term is lost, but the details are often bizarre. Search and rescue teams find gear neatly stacked, but the owner is gone. No tracks, no sign of a struggle. It's as if they were plucked from the very air. These aren't the actions of a conventional predator. A bear mauls, a cougar drags its prey. This is something else, something intelligent, something that understands how to hunt us. The Native American legends were never just stories. They were warnings, warnings that were ignored by a government that believed it could control nature itself. They described the Wendigo not as a monster but as a spirit of winter and famine, a curse that can befall a man and turn him into a cannibalistic beast. But the government files suggest something more tangible, a biological reality. Did the curse create the creature, or did the creature inspire the legend? The files point to specific environmental triggers: long, harsh winters, periods of starvation, isolation, conditions that are becoming more frequent with climate change. Is it possible that we are inadvertently creating more favorable habitats for this thing to thrive? That the ancient balance that kept it confined to the deepest, darkest parts of the wilderness is being upset? The government's frantic efforts at containment might be a losing battle against an enemy they do not understand, and an environment that is increasingly on its side. We see evidence of their desperation in the technology they deploy: drones with experimental sensor packages, seismic detectors capable of distinguishing a bipedal footstep from that of a quadruped, and low-frequency sonic emitters supposedly for wildlife deterrence. But what kind of wildlife are you deterring that doesn't react to conventional methods? What are you trying to drive away that is so elusive, so powerful, that you need to resort to classified next-generation technology just to keep it at bay? Every redacted file, every sudden forest closure, every hushed story from a retired soldier or park ranger adds another piece to the puzzle. The picture that forms is one of a silent, ongoing war. A war being fought in the shadows of our pristine wilderness. A war we are not meant to know about. They are not protecting the forests from us. They are protecting us from what lives in the forests. What lives there, what waits there, and what is perpetually, eternally hungry. The question is no longer, does it exist? The question the government is scrambling to answer is, how many of them are there? And what happens when they stop hiding?